we are with Atland Ventures, and welcome to our future event with Atland Ventures. We're excited to have a bunch of amazing panel today. So we have Kylie and JJ, myself, who are currently with Atland Ventures, Sasadar, who is an alumni of Atland Ventures out in LA, and then Anish, the CEO of NIT, one of our portfolio companies out here. So got the whole gang here. So I think to start things off, why don't we do, everyone, why don't you give yourself a little bit of a quick background on who you are, kind of like where you're from, and then what you're currently doing or building, investing, or spending most of your time doing itself. So Saucy is the first one on my screen I see. So why don't you start off from there?
Yeah. Hey guys, I'm Sasadar. As Jagmeer mentioned, like I am a recent alumni of the University of Minnesota, but also Atlan as well. And so kind of grew up in the Minnesota area, like in the suburbs of Minneapolis. So very familiar with like that part of town. And essentially got involved with that when like my sophomore year of college, and was just really impressed with the experience, and kind of realized I really like the space of venture capital. And so started looking for full-time jobs in the area, and now work at Anthos Capital out here in LA. So on the investing side of the table, but excited to chat here and just learn more from everyone else on the panel too.
Okay, I can intro myself next. Like Jags mentioned as well, I'm currently at Atland Ventures. I'm the VP of Platform as well as a director. Outside of Atland, I'm the sourcing lead at Groove Capital, which just started up in January, and then I do some portfolio management for an angel investor in California. Excited to get going.
I can go next. So I'm also part of Atlan. I'm a director. Similar to Saucy, I started in my sophomore year, and similar to Kylie, I interned at Groove Capital spring of last year, and now I am a scout for AWS and helping two founders from Toronto to spin up a venture capital practice. So just doing a lot of research right now, and we're going to be raising funds in the preceding months.
Awesome. I can go next. My name is Anish. I'm the CEO and co-founder of NIT. We are one of Atlan's portfolio companies. Super excited to be part of the team, guys, and have really appreciated you guys' support these last few months since investing in us. NIT, we are a Gen Z insights platform. We help brands tap into a network of about 60,000 Gen Z consumers and capture feedback in the form of video, which is 6 times more data rich than your typical customer survey. And then we've created technology that kind of streamlines the workflow of actually analyzing those videos. So grew up in Virginia, went to UVA, University of Virginia, go Hoos for a year or two before dropping out, moving down to Austin, and then going through the tech service program up in Minneapolis, farm to fork with Ecolab and Cargill. So pumped to be here. Thanks for inviting me on the panel, guys, and excited to chat.
And then I'm Jag, currently one of the managing partners at Atland Ventures from West Minneapolis, or west suburbs of Minneapolis. And just been heavily involved with VC, worked with a couple startups, currently at a YC backed one. So pretty fun. But aside from that, excited to have everyone up here. So kicking things off a little bit, I would say, tell me like what really was kind of everyone's journey getting into entrepreneurship and or VC. So we'll probably do the same order as we did before.
Yeah, I can kick off. I think for me, like in terms of my broader interest in terms of like just startups in general and that whole ecosystem, like I think that stemmed from kind of just being a consumer of a lot of those products in the beginning and kind of growing up. Like I was always kind of fascinated with whatever kind of cool thing is like being built at the time. And for me, like initially a lot of that kind of stemmed from like my love for clothing and sneakers, like a lot of people. And seeing, these companies where like, whether it's like the emergence of like these clothing subscription boxes or even companies like StockX or Grailed, seeing the emergence of those over time was just really interesting to me. And I think I started to notice that, a lot of this innovation wasn't really coming from, big, large corporations, but like these newer startups that are kind of entering the space and trying to switch up like the whole model. And then kind of going to college, I was just, pretty set on actually going into like advertising and marketing analytics. So like completely different And again, I mean, that kind of stems still from like the fact of like my love for like the clothing and sneaker side of things, right? Because that's something where like brand is kind of everything. And so like being able to help enable and like build that brand through marketing was just really interesting to me. But then yeah, I kind of fell into Atlan by way of chance and realized that, this is pretty cool. And I can talk to companies and any different industry, see a bunch of different business models and like founders from all walks of life. And so like having that change of pace was something that was super compelling to me. And yeah, I mean that's kind of how I fell into it. Like my first experience was here at Atland Ventures, but that's at least what kind of sparked my interest in the space.
Awesome. Well, what kind of sparked my interest really into entrepreneurship was when I interned for just a family friend at her business that she'd started up. She was a business coach. And so I did a lot of consulting and kind of reached out to a bunch of different people and kind of really liked the unstructured way that I felt startups were. I also did some student consulting for Caribou and MN United and realized that I didn't really like the whole corporate structure where it was much more you had very firm deliverables and then kind of formed different conclusions that way. So then when I came in my freshman year at Carlson, I just kind of looked at a couple of different clubs and found Atland Ventures and applied and then ended up getting in that spring, so second semester. And then since then, I've kind of just been working with a bunch of different um, entrepreneurs. And then that following my sophomore year, gotten with Group Capital as well. So been much more VC focused, and it's been really interesting to kind of explore both of those different sides.
Yeah, I think for me, coming into school, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I've always had this inner drive to help as many people as possible, and kind of realized that the best way to do that is through startups. It's kind of the biggest value creation machine that we have available to us. So had a conversation with my uncle, who's a lawyer here in Minneapolis for startups, and he mentioned Atland Ventures, and I was like, oh my God, what's that? So that summer, started a company, went through the MN Cup, and we're semifinalists, but like we weren't going to take it all the way. But basically used that experience to get into Atlan, and ever since then it's been a whirlwind of learning and been really fun. So that was kind of my foray.
Awesome. So I got involved with entrepreneurship pretty early. I started my first company when I was, I think, like 15 or 16. Throughout kind of middle school and high school, was traveling to like places like Haiti, India, China, working on all these different type of more NGO focused projects, like desalination devices, purchasing and distributing mosquito nets, water filtration systems. So that kind of sparked this idea that I had when I was 15 or 16, which was to start this cause marketing agency. It was called Feed a Friend. And that turned into, after a couple of years of doing it while doing high school, it turned into the first company I started, which was Perpix, which we launched while I was still in school at UVA. Ended up working on that for a year or two before dropping out. It is very difficult. I don't know how some people do it, but I was not able to juggle school and working at a startup or starting a company at the same time. So that's how I kind of got into it from an early age. It's always something I love doing, and I think while I was still in school, both in high school and in college, I just kind of knew that I was more passionate about working on the companies I was building more than maybe like classes. Really rough first year in college for sure. Very difficult to juggle both, but yeah, that's how I got started, and it's been 6-7 years of doing this, and it's been a ton of fun. Love just the idea and process of building something from scratch and working with just amazing people to work towards a bigger goal.
Awesome. It's really great to hear that from everyone. So the next question I do have for everyone before we jump into individual like sub questions for each people in the panel is like, what's an industry that you're currently closely following right now? And it could be anything that's like from like a specific vertical to like something super niche like sneakers that are or renewable sneakers, for example. So let's kick it off with Sasi.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the area I spend most of my time in is enterprise software, to be honest. Like I probably spend like 60% of my time looking into that area. But I do think it's a bit of a cop-out answer because it's, it touches everything, right? Like there's so many different areas that like everything is an enterprise nowadays. So I think maybe I'll go with like the blockchain or crypto space, which is kind of funny to me because it's an area that I've always kind of like ignored, honestly, in the past. But like over the last few months, like I've actually like, kind of sat down and like educated myself in the space and trying to understand like how that whole ecosystem works, because it just changes so fast and like every day. But I think to me like it's pretty clear that this is an area with like a ton of potential, and it's kind of only just starting in terms of adoption, and there's just a ton of different applications. Like you have companies that are like block native that are like taking a look at very technical stuff and trying to do transaction monitoring and helping traditional financial institutions kind of move into that space, as there's that growing interest. And then you have like things on the completely opposite side, right? Like companies like Axie Infinity, which is like an NFT based game, and they kind of are pioneering this whole like pay to play model and building this whole ecosystem around it. And I mean, and they're doing like crazy numbers, right? I read somewhere that they're doing like 15 million a day. And so like to me, what's really interesting is just like there's so many different areas that you can kind of see this kind of be incorporated, or like the intersection of so many areas with blockchain. So I'm just like excited to kind of see where it goes next. But like a space that I've definitely been like keeping an eye on.
I'm gonna hop in next, Kylie, if that's all right, because Saucy, you kind of took my answer. I too have been like really into crypto and NFTs lately. Kind of doing learning by doing. Bought some NFTs, created some wallets and stuff like that. And another thing that I've really been seeing is just like the way that NFTs can be used in the future, I think is really interesting, because right now we're kind of in a place where everybody's just shilling like art that they randomly generated, and then, hey, pay me like $20,000 for this, and it's like, okay, great, like you can have a profile picture. But where it's really interesting is like the underlying technology that you can use with smart contracts, and that's maybe a bit technical, but basically you can code in different ways to interact with the way that the NFTs are traded. So for example, if you're an artist and you sell your art, or if you're a like the Dallas Mavericks and you sell a ticket, you can then code in there that anytime it's sold after that, you get 10% or 20% or 50% of that sale. So it can help solve problems like skimming tickets and scalping and stuff. And that's just a space that I've been really getting into. And one of the reasons too is just because all my smartest friends are getting into that space, and that's something that I look at is where are people spending their nights and weekends, and where are like really smart people kind of migrating towards. And I think right now it's crypto, which is really interesting.
Great segue, JJ. I guess I'm one of those smart people too, because I've been doing a lot of research on the NFT marketplaces. I just finished a project actually for the angel investor that I work for, because he's thinking of starting up his own. And I find it really interesting that there's so many different verticals that you can go within. They don't have any big general NFT marketplaces. There've become so many tiny little pocket communities within like the general location, where I was looking at one where it was like an art design NFT marketplace. I can't remember the name. Oh, Triple Act is what it was called. That is coming soon. And then there's like it's called Sports Findia, and that's focused on like the sports NFTs. And then there are the bigger ones like Rarible and OpenSea that have already kind of blown up. But I just find it really interesting that this is obviously a space where a lot of people are starting to get super fascinated by it, and just really starting to build those own marketplaces so that there's a space for those communities to start building in. And I think that that's just a huge trend in general with Gen Z. We're kind of building those community pockets just with a bunch of different places, even within the industry, like the Gen Z VCs channels are starting to have those different breakups. And you can already see that in different industries like the NFTs, where they're creating those marketplaces.
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite parts about my job is that we get to study our generation and how our generation is impacting and changing all these industries. So we've looked at and have done research on everything from NFTs to crypto to everything that everyone just talked about. One place that I'm incredibly interested in and where we're doing a lot of work, and that I'm just personally attracted to as well, is the world of sports. So over these last couple of months, we've locked in a handful of really awesome sports clients, from individual major league teams to some of the major leagues themselves, and we've looked into kind of the cross section of sports with up and coming trends like NFTs as well. But the sports industry is just, it's fascinating in what our generation is doing to really shake it up. Who is that future fan with Gen Z, and like how are they going to interact with sports? Like from are they streaming it live on their phone? Do they even want to go to the stadium or the arena anymore? Or what will actually motivate them to go there? So looking into that stuff has been incredible. So a lot of the work that we've been doing as a company has been around that sports industry, and personally and selfishly, I've been focusing a lot on that research that we're doing, or those clients as well. It's just so fascinating.
Great to hear. So a lot of NFTs. I'm surprised no one said energy. I mean, SMH, man. Well, you can't have crypto without energy. But aside from that, I think I want to jump into some other questions and go start it off kind of individually. So I'll start with you, Saucy, and then go with Kylie and JJ, and then to Anish, and then cycle around there. So for you, Saucy, you're now a graduate. You joined Atland right when it started growing too, and being, let's say, a student while also as a VC while in your undergrad itself. How did that experience kind of like help shape the way that you looked at to your career after you graduated, and like other opportunities that opened up for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of goes back to like, what I was mentioning a little bit earlier is that, coming to college, I was, not really looking at venture at all. And I mean, like, I knew it existed, but that's about it. Like, knew nothing about how it actually worked, or any players in the space. And, was just really focused on the advertising and like marketing aspect of things. But really, like through Atlan, I was kind of able to get my first exposure to, what working in VC is actually like. And that, I think, like, for me, the biggest draw was just the fact that like no day really looks the same. And there's just, so much variety in terms of just like who you're talking to, the companies you're, interacting with. And so it just opened my eyes to the fact that, that this was even a space that I was, interested in and wanted to pursue. And it was kind of like, for me, it was kind of by luck in terms of like translating that in terms of like full-time role. Like I just happened to, like, at this point, like in my junior year, as I was applying for internships, I was still applying to marketing and advertising roles, at like consumer brands I really liked, right? So like Nike, Spotify, like those like big brands that there's just a lot of consumer interest in. And then on Handshake, which was sort of our internship platform at the U, or like our job platform, I came across the internship application for Anthos, and essentially went through that process, which was super similar to like what I do at Atlan, right, on a day-to-day basis, which is like evaluating companies. And so that process was just really exciting to me, even like during the application process. And I mean, no one likes an application process, so like that was already a good sign. And through that was just able to like bring over a lot of the skills that I picked up at Atlan, and over to the full-time role. So I think it definitely had like a huge impact just in terms of how I viewed what I wanted to do as like an actual career. So yeah, definitely a big impact.
Oh yeah, for sure. Opens a lot of new doors there too. So kind of transitioning to people who are currently in the VC space as students self, Kylie and JJ, what have you noticed or some big misconceptions about being, let's say, a Gen Z VC or someone who's like a student VC when you're talking to some of your other peers who are in venture clubs or wanting to break into the space?
I can jump in there. Honestly, I think that not a lot of people understand what we're doing, I would say. I think that they know that it's there and that Atland Ventures is there, but they don't necessarily understand like to the extent that we do the work. I know at least like the entrepreneurship club, they have like a bunch of people who come in and speak about some stuff, and I've gone in a couple times and just kind of just talked to a couple peers in the class and just spoke a little bit about Atlan. And they're like, oh, like I've always been interested on the other side of entrepreneurship, but have never really had the opportunity to really look into it anymore. And I think it's almost like VC has always been something that's like, oh, after I get my MBA or after I work in startups for a couple of years, where it's never been like the normal route to go right into it or even have an opportunity as a student to get into it or even learn much about it. So I think that honestly, the biggest misconception that I've noticed is that it's just incredibly hard to break into, which it is, but I think that there are becoming to be much more opportunities. As long as people are looking for those, I think that they're out there and people can honestly start looking for those.
Yeah, one thing I've seen maybe more on Twitter than in my everyday conversations. I don't talk a lot with my friends aren't really in venture themselves, but I see a lot of people will tweet and maybe they're like 30 or something or like partners at funds and they're like it's so sad seeing the young people wanting to get into venture because they're just like going after the clout grabs. And I don't know, it makes me sad to hear other people saying that because that's just like not at all what it is. I think obviously investment banking, like consulting, probably pay way more. What it is like wanting to get on the ground floor with founders, to be at the cusp of innovation, and to be like having conversations and being curious and learning every day. And that's what attracted me to venture in general. Like I said, I want to help as many people as possible, but I also have my own like inner drives, and those are like my curiosity and my hunger to learn. And I think venture is a way to satisfy both. So that's how I'm approaching it, and how a lot of people I know are approaching it. It comes from a place of curiosity, and then also like naturally empathetic people, I think, are the ones who really succeed in this industry, because you have to have empathy for founders and you have to have empathy for just other investors and be able to adopt new perspectives. And that comes with learning and stuff like that as well. But I think it's more of like a character trait matching that's happening than like a clout grab or anything like that.
Awesome to see that and to hear your opinions on that. And then now you mentioned, like, especially like a lot of people want to go into the getting on the ground for getting it up running with the entrepreneurs. That's a good transition to question for Anish. And I think for me was question I do have for you is, because you're on the ground floor with a lot of like sports brands and Gen Z insights. Like, what have you learned specifically, like working with Purpix and Knit, about how like Gen Z interacts with different experiences, different products when it comes into, let's say, very much consumer spaces or very much like sports and entertainment?
Yeah. So I think like one of the major things that we are seeing with our platform is, like, first of all, we've designed our platform to be very Gen Z friendly, really young consumer friendly. I mean, the vision for the company is not just to focus on Gen Z insights, it's really to kind of pioneer not only how people are gathering insights, which we think video is the best format for that, but also how to analyze those videos and make it more efficient, make it more scalable, make it enterprise ready. But what we're seeing really with Gen Z insights today, and what we're seeing just across almost every single industry, is that Gen Z is really shaking up every industry. And it's really coming from, and this sounds like pretty basic, but the digitization that Gen Z is driving across these industries. So, like when we study fintech, for example, and when we do work across fintech, it's, moving from, your banks that, branch banks to mobile banking. So, doing a lot of work around like, what does Gen Z want in these mobile banking apps? This shift towards more of like these super apps where you have all these different features, everything that you would be doing, at a bank or at other financial services, like at your fingertips. When it comes to sports, we're seeing that digitization play out in a few different ways. The first one is, they're no longer going to watch the games as much, or they're going to watch the games for very different reasons. It's more about kind of having a good time with your friends and having the game going on in the background and kind of tuning in and out of that, and more about the experience of being there. Or when we talk about like actually watching the game, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know the last time I watched a game on cable. It's mostly through these streaming apps, and that is really upending how leagues are making their money. Most of their money is coming through sponsorships from the advertisers, which are around cable. So that's kind of like what across all these industries, what we're seeing is like okay, Gen Z, we're the first digitally native generation out there. We've grown up only knowing, the internet and, really spending a lot of time with, things like iPhones and stuff. And like, that's one of the key differences between us and millennials. Is just, we grew up on social media, we grew up on the internet. And that's completely changing the way all these industries are working. And a lot of industries are having, some of them are having a lot of trouble navigating this shift, and that's what we're there to help them with. And in some cases, like the upstarts, or even in some cases the incumbents that are doing a really good job, we are very digitally focused. Like, digital experience is very key to us, and if we don't have a good digital experience, we would actually like leave a platform. And so it's about how do you continue building that loyalty through digital experience, maintaining that brand equity through your digital experience, and that's what we're here to help with.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I think I'm the same boat as you. Like, I don't think I've watched a sports game on cable for such a long time. It's just more and more much like an experience-based thing versus like an actual like, oh, let's see who's gonna play a score. But yeah, I was actually very insightful there too. And then kind of circling back, I want to go back to Sasadar and kind of talk about your transition. So having been, let's say, in VC with Atland in the Midwest market and then transitioning to SoCal, what's some of the biggest differences you've noticed in the ecosystem and as well as like say the type of focus on deals that come up your way?
Yeah, I mean, it's been kind of interesting to see. I think like it's hard for me to speak to fully because like even when I was involved in like the VC ecosystem, like startup ecosystem in Minnesota, it was at at like not a full-time level, right? So like this isn't what I was doing day in, day out. So like with that as a preface, I think like after moving to LA, like even LA itself is like an area that's like just starting to become like more of like a hub within California of I think like tech companies and just venture capital. Because before it was just predominantly like only the Bay, right? And Silicon Valley and those traditional areas. I think like especially within LA, like you see a lot more entertainment companies. And entertainment in like really the broadest sense, right? Like that could be a consumer facing company that's focused on entertainment, B2B, whatever it might look like. And so like there's definitely certain industries here that are, a little more prominent, I would say. But in terms of like companies like at Anthos specifically, like I don't think location necessarily limits us. Like I mean, we look at all different countries, all different like markets. So like very much so like a generalist, like agnostic firm. Which to me was like part of the draw, right? Like it kind of comes back to that. I want to be seeing like new stuff every day and talking to new companies and people. And so I don't know, like within like the SoCal, I guess like VC ecosystem, like sure you see a lot more like large deals. But I think like that doesn't necessarily mean they're better deals.
For sure. I know a lot of my friends, especially now back into SoCal, like there's a huge debate between NorCal, SoCal, and like come from Minnesota. It's like, all right, you just one is a lot warmer than the other.
Yeah, exactly.
The way I say it. Perfect. And then I actually want to transition back to the more VC. So Kylie and JJ, like you being part of say part-time VC analysts and also now directors too, like how has this experience shaped the way you approach, let's say, learning stuff from your say your classwork for example, like your classes that talk about higher level strategies or like emerging technologies? And like how has this experience of being involved in entrepreneurship in your undergrad really impacted the way you look at things in life?
Yeah, I think, one of the things I do love again about venture and startups and stuff and why I got interested in the space to begin with is because the application to life is so clear. Like the metaphors are just like one-to-one relationships of, your personal brand, your own career path, relationships with different people. It all connects. And that's something I've tried to take into like school and also just like how I'm approaching what I get involved with is hoping that it all connects and trying to fill in the blanks in different areas. So I'm getting a computer science degree I don't want to be a software engineer when I graduate. It was mainly just so that I could, actually have intelligent conversations with people building cool shit. And I guess when it relates to like life and how startups relate to life, just like what matters is your growth trajectory. And having people invest in you, like it's not a one-man show. There's just like so many things like that you start to pick up in the context of startups and in the context of all these lessons that like really famous like venture capitalists and stuff are partaking or are imparting through like podcasts and books and articles and stuff like that then you take into your life, and it's like, okay, that actually applies here. And it's just really interesting. Obviously I can't go through every single one, but yeah, that's what's in it.
For sure. I think it's also made me appreciate learning a little bit more. I think that a lot of people get caught up in, oh, this is just another task, it's another assignment, it's something that I have to do just to graduate. And sometimes we forget all the different steps that it takes. And especially in college, where it's such a time to take in a bunch of different opportunities and join different clubs and start to really learn, like maybe exactly what you want to do instead of just sticking exactly and strictly to the books. I think that at the same time, like it's also made me appreciate it a little bit more. I think that sometimes school, especially when you get to college, just becomes like such a task. And Alan has definitely helped me take out more of my creative side and be able to maybe research and learn about the aspects that I am really, really passionate about. Or I'm able to balance that with school, where I'm starting to like really learn those strategies that I can probably start applying to Atlan. Like I'm in a strategic class, and a lot of the stuff and just the processes that we're learning are things that I've already started to apply in Atlan. So it's kind of something that I've been able to balance back and forth and really kind of work together with.
I'm just going to test those points too. I mean, definitely did a bigger approach. I think before I mentioned was a crypto. One of my classes was basically like talking about like analyzing crypto and supply chains. So having been able to do research has been great. But let's turn it over to Anish now. So this is kind of like a little bit off topic a bit, but when Atlan first reached out to you about potentially investing, especially being, let's say, a student-run Gen Z VC firm, what were your first thoughts about hearing that? And like, kind of walk me through like what was the reasoning why you wanted Atlan on your cap table?
Yeah, so to be completely honest, the first thought was I was a little doubtful because when we were starting the company, we pitched to a lot of student-run VCs, and some were great, others were not that great. So overall experience before Atlan was like nothing great. So a little, I was in doubt a little bit, but the process of working with you guys, through the investment process. Obviously, we worked really closely with Hunter over there, and super tight process. You guys were very. I think the best thing was about the process was like very mindful of the entrepreneur, and in their time, like fundraising is not easy, and having someone that kind of understands, that really empathizes with that process, and does their homework and is just as fast and diligent about it as we tried to be, was really nice. And then since then, I think one of the things that we were most excited about, and the reason why we really wanted a kind of Gen Z or student-led VC on our platform, is we do a lot of work just because we are a Gen Z Insights platform with Gen Zers that are still in college. So 18 to 24-year-olds are a huge part of our platform, and having that, kind of the boots on the ground. I know you guys, and JJ was just saying, like, you guys are actually using our platform. You guys are literally our members on our platform. Like, that's so awesome to have that kind of perspective. And I mean, like, I'm a Gen Zer. I'm also just like, I've just turned 24. So like, we're about to turn 24. So like, I feel like I'm very close to what's happening with our generation, but that's not always going to be true, right? In a couple of years, like, I might not have, not be as tapped in as we'd want to be. And we want to be really close to our customers, to our end users. So having you guys and having the support there, from actually using our platform to helping us grow our network, to even thinking about this 3-4 years down the line, having that kind of closeness with our customers, because they're literally invested in our company, I think is going to be huge for us.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I 100% go back to saying like we love having it too in our portfolio. Keeps us showing like what's actually happening around other campuses too, and then also gets us a better connection to the Twins, for example. So like shout out to you, Anish, with the Twin shirt in the background. Kind of funny, someone from Austin, Texas, has a Twin shirt in the background versus anyone else here in Minnesota. Or yeah.
Oh, I went to a lot of Twins games when I was up there for Techstars, so huge Twins fan.
Awesome to hear that. So before actually I think go to the next question, I just want to let people know, like, if you have any questions you want to ask, please put it in the Q&A section. So under session, there should be like a sub header called Q&A. Type a question in there, and then we'll be able to ask them. And then if you want to address a certain person, so for example, if you want from Sasadar for VC, Kylie and JJ from Atlan, or Anish from just like an entrepreneur side, just put like their name saying person, question, and then I'll be able to ask that. But I think I want to do a quick like group question of it, just kind of like have everyone's hear their opinions, kind of like what are some things they're looking at for emerging trends. So the next question I'm looking into is like, how do you guys gather your research or gather like insights you hear from like the news or other platforms you use to engage with emerging trends? I would say just like the traditional news sources or like books that you guys read.
Yeah, well, my number one source for emerging trends is NIT. It's a pretty cool company. We put out a lot of reports and stuff. You guys should check it out. No, but it's really powerful. Like we have so many, close to 60,000 people on our platform, right? Like we're constantly seeing, unique things pop out from our research, both that we're doing for our clients, some of which we can't share, but mostly, the internal research that we do, we actually post reports. So shameless plug, check out our website. We release reports every month, talking about, most of these Gen Z emerging trends. The second thing for me, at least, is like I'm a huge fan of like morning newsletters. Like I love those. I've been, I think, subscribed to Morning Brew and Hustle for a couple years now. So that's kind of like my morning routine. Wake up, after on my way to work and reading. I don't drive, I walk, so don't worry, it's super safe. Reading these newsletters with a good cup of coffee, and I think those have been really helpful. And then lastly, like social media, right? Like Gen Z gets a lot of their news from social media. I just got on the Twitter game like a couple months ago. I was very late to it, but get a lot of my news from like, Instagram, Snapchat, and other platforms as well. Just starting to get more involved with Twitter. So yeah, I would say a mix of social media, with the work that we're actually doing, and then also these kind of like next gen news publishers like Morning Brew, Hustle.
Yeah, I'm kind of in a similar boat where I'm definitely more so a fan of the newsletters. Like I'm not gonna lie to you guys and say I read books every day and listen to a ton of podcasts, because I don't. I'd much rather leave like those, I guess, formats for like stuff that I'm personally interested in, like from like a fun perspective, and not necessarily from like hey, I'm trying to learn about something perspective. But in terms of like newsletters, like if you can kind of classify this as one, like Exploding Topics is one that I have like been reading for a while now. And it's essentially what they do is kind of like scrape the whole internet, right? For like, what are people searching? Like, what are people mentioning on social media and things like that, and trying to identify like what's trending or what will be in the future, just based off of those sort of metrics. And that's one that's been, super cool, because it gets as broad as like, hey, this industry is kind of looks like, a lot of people are talking about it. But it also gets as, I think like 2 weeks ago, I saw something where it was like functional mushrooms and like protein bars. So it's like you get like as granular as you can get, and also super broad. But that one's just been like a cool one to kind of see, because, when I first started reading it, it was really just a data dump of information, of just like, hey, here's what people are searching. And that was kind of it. But I think over time, as they like started to grow their user base and like got more people sort of, paying attention to it, they've started to sort of shift their positioning towards, this is a way for like VCs and then also entrepreneurs to kind of just, keep an eye on what's kind of happening in the world around them. in like a quick, easy way, right? Like if I can get a weekly newsletter in my inbox that kind of highlights these 10 things of like what's kind of been popping online recently, then that's super helpful.
Yeah, definitely. I'm also on like the same thing with the newsletters. I think that really reflects us as as Gen Zers, because I think it's like the whole thing where our attention spans are approximately like 30 seconds, because sometimes I don't even make it through the Morning Brew newsletter because it's so long. But I get to the main point, so I think that that's like the important part. But another newsletter that I really think is interesting, it's called Startup Search. It started a couple months ago, but it brings up like some of the bigger deals that have been kind of circulating around, and then also just some smaller ones based off of different states that they kind of like circulate throughout, just like different months. So definitely check that out. Um, as far as other things, like there's a huge Gen Z VC Slack channel that I kind of mentioned, and as well as like social media and stuff. I think that's just really interesting because you get a lot of really individual perspectives, as well as just people obviously showcasing different newsletters that they've started, or just other organizations that they're kind of a part of as well.
So I'm actually a little bit different than everybody else here, I guess. I prefer the longer form stuff. So I read a few newsletters that are like very long. It takes maybe like an hour to read through it. But I really enjoy the in-depth and like diving into something, and trying to understand it at a fundamental level. And that's why I really like podcasts as well. I probably listen to like 6 podcasts a week or something like that. I'll do it while I'm like, if I'm doing laundry, I have to have a podcast in, or maybe it'll be music. But if I'm like working out, sometimes I'll switch between podcasts or music. But I just really love the way that podcasts, you can kind of like be doing other stuff and still be learning and still be like taking in different perspectives and conversations on stuff. So I'll listen to stuff on DeFi or like different venture models. That's something I'm super interested in, and like the new wave of rolling funds and syndicates and how that can all play together. But yeah, for like emerging trends, being aware of it, I think it's important to be on like social media and like Twitter and stuff. And then to really understand it, I try to, I guess, find people you can trust is really important, because if you listen to a podcast with someone who has a terrible point of view, you're just going to waste an hour of your life. So I try to stick to the channels that I know I can trust.
I will also just add in,
And
oh, sorry. I just want to add in too, like, I think it kind
go
of
ahead.
pertains to like, especially within like VC now, I think you see a lot of people using like scout networks as a way to get a lot of information and like kind of gather this sort of like boots on the ground level research. And like, it's something that, at Anthos, we've been doing a ton more of, especially for, a lot of these things where it's like Gen Z is kind of leading the charge, right? So as we're looking into the gaming space, we're starting to develop a gaming scout network of people that can actually play test this stuff and give us actual feedback, because I mean these are going to be the users at the end of the day. But I mean, I think outside of just gaming, like that kind of extends across the board in terms of verticals, where like nowadays you see pretty much every VC fund trying to think through how they can create some type of like that scout network at like the college and high school level too.
Yeah, I think just to chime in just a little bit, even though I'm supposed to be the panelist, do a really good job at this. I think a lot of times, like, DJ's podcast has been good. Honestly, like, just being able to read, like, some Twitter threads has been able to learn a lot, and then, of course, I'm traditional old-fashioned books, like, try to read at least 2 books a month at times. Recently, that's been not the case, but just kind of, like, everything is very cyclical is the way I looked at it, and it's just that you can have an emerging idea, but how to, like, make it grow. It's still some, like, fundamental frameworks that people use still going forward, and also I mean, it's always good to see like the PayPal mafia or like people like Stripe mafia now, like people who are part of something that has been really growing from stick 0 to 1, and seeing how the people who are affiliated with that are starting their own companies too, and like what they're learning their process as well. So a lot of resources out there. And before I jump to the next question, I know there was a question in chat from Cyrus, and they're saying, with recent Minnesota VCs announcing new big funds, we had Arthur Ventures with 35 million, Matchstick with 55 million. How has fundraising been for Atlan Fund 2? I can take that. It's been, I think in terms of like for fundraising, definitely a thought we can we've had considerably, but we really can't share too much about it. But it's just been kind of like with other funds too. Like we're seeing some of our investments growing pretty well, and we're seeing some companies are like we're seeing a lot more awareness of Minnesota venture scene, specifically in the last year as things have gotten like remote. It's no longer we've noticed that like you have to be in a certain area to be part of this fund. It's very much like a lot of theses have been readjusted to factor in being able to be remote across the world and investing in like companies. Let's say, for example, like you could be A16Z and have most of your portfolio, like most of your investments be in like the Midwest. Like we've been seeing a lot more traction up here, and it's been pretty exciting to see that around here overall. All right. And I would say a few more minutes left. I would say, okay, the question I do have too. So for each person looking over, well, like next couple of years or next couple of months, actually, let's start off this. So the next 6 months, where do you see yourself being in terms of the entrepreneurial startup scene? And then to follow that up, to where do you see yourself in like 2 to 3 years from now in that scene as well? So why don't we start off with the original order?
Forgot to unmute. So the question's more so around like where we see ourselves over the next few months, in terms of like fitting within the ecosystem. Um, I think like for me, it probably is kind of like still trying to figure out like what industries or verticals kind of interest me, at least from like the investor perspective. Because I think for me, like especially just joining fairly recently and being a very generalist fund, like in terms of pretty much everything, like location, like increasingly stage as well, and industry. Like there's just such a wide net of things I could sort of dive into. And like it's totally fine being a generalist as an investor, but I think like it's still important to have at least a few areas that you want to dive deeper into. And so kind of over time, like as I talk to more companies and just look into different markets, trying to pinpoint like what those areas are. Because I think like especially nowadays, there's just so much going on and the market is moving so fast, that sometimes like that can kind of take like the back burner, and it's more so just focused on okay like deal instead of also taking a look at the broader perspective and kind of taking a step back and figuring out like what are you actually passionate about and like from a market perspective, and then that can kind of lead like into the investment and deal side in terms of sourcing and all that stuff from there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think since kind of hopping on to Atland, it's been almost like a frenzy of just trying to figure out exactly what avenue I want to go into and maybe what direction that I find most interesting. And I've gone like a little bit with the analyst, working with Atland, obviously, and then Groove Capital. I'm the sourcing lead there, so I've done the sourcing side, and then some portfolio management. And I think really defining what I'm passionate about and want to move forward with is something that I need to focus on moving forward. Kind of like Saucy said, I think that I've been so like focused in like a general scope where I haven't really tried to take a step back and focus on maybe what avenues or what areas of focus I want to start looking into more. So I think that that's definitely something that I'm going to start doing moving forward.
Yeah, I think for me, it's hope to keep my head above water as far as school goes, and then get involved with as much outside of that as possible. So, like I mentioned before, helping a couple of founders from Toronto to start up a venture practice, and I'm super excited about that opportunity because we're really starting from ground zero and looking at it from first principles of where arbitrages are in the venture ecosystem right now. So doing a lot of research on that right now, and in 6 months, hopefully we have a plan and are actually executing on that plan and iterating on it. So that's what I'm excited about. That's kind of what I'm focused on. I have a lot of other stuff that I'm involved with as well, Atlan being one of them, but that's kind of what gets me up in the morning right now.
I'll still be building it 6 months from now, 2 years from now, hopefully for a long, long time. So yeah, I'm super passionate about what we've built here. We have an absolutely incredible team. So wake up every morning just really excited to work with some awesome people, including our investors like you guys.
Awesome to hear. Yeah, hopefully like 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we're still building on it, and that'll be good for all of us here. So I would say everyone here shares one common thing is that we all we're following our passions in undergraduate. So what's a piece of advice you'd give to someone who specifically right now is would be starting their undergrad or wanting to or middle of their undergrad right now to get involved in either around something they're passionate about or help out entrepreneurs on campus?
I think one of the things that I'm most excited about and frankly just most proud of, just from my very short undergrad experience and kind of my advice would be like to just take risks like early on, right? Like the one thing that our generation has is like we're incredibly young and we have a lot of time to figure out and solve some really really hard and difficult issues. And so the one thing we have on our side is time. And so I don't like this is not the path that I think everyone should take. Like I talk to a lot of entrepreneurs that are still in college, and frankly, I probably dropped out a little too early. Like it was really tough. My first year was really difficult. But I'm just really glad that I took that risk and took that jump, and like whatever that means for you, right? Whether that's like taking that risk and putting yourself out there and joining like an awesome awesome organization like Atland Ventures, like all of you guys, JJ and Kylie, and you guys seem like you're doing like a bunch of other stuff outside of school as well. It's just like take that risk and do it. And usually it's like the hardest, but like most rewarding experience. Like frankly, I did not think like 4 or 5 years later after starting, my first company in high school that I would still be working on startups. But it's just been so fun. And like the journey has kind of taken its kind of own path, and it's just been a really fun experience. So yeah, I would just say like just take that risk, just do it. Don't think about it, be smart about it, but over index on risk this early.
I think to go back on a point I made earlier, just about life and how venture and startups kind of inform my perspective on life. This is a huge one, and Anish, you really hit the nail on the head for me. It's taking asymmetric risks, and you realize that especially with the benefit of time that we have, we really can take those asymmetric risks where the upside is really high, but the downside is maybe you wasted 6 months of your life. Whereas the upside is you're in a niche situation and you're working on something that you love doing and is going really well. Like and I think that upside is certainly worth the downside. And even if one doesn't work out, you can continue making bets. And that's something that venture teaches you, that you continue to make those bets and those asymmetric risk opportunities. And over time, it'll work out. So I guess the other thing I would say is just like do the job before you have it. And that applies to basically anything. Like in today's hiring environment, I think just have a portfolio of some kind, no matter what you want to do.
The one thing I would add to JJ is the downside's not necessarily wasting 6 months of your life. Like you're just going to learn a shit ton in those 6 months. So like worst case scenario, like I wouldn't necessarily say it would be a waste, but you just like learn so much out of it. And that's like an awesome downside.
Fair.
I think like for me, what I would say is, I mean, very similar in terms of like what Anish and JJ were kind of mentioning. But like for me, I've never really been a big fan at all of like the classroom learning kind of like setting. And I feel like a lot of what I learned throughout undergrad came pretty much almost exclusively from like anything I was involved in outside of that. Like I think like classroom like knowledge is really important to like getting the foundational level. But I think in terms of actually like developing interests, like you and like trying to figure out like, hey, is this something I want to do? It like the best way to do that is to get your hands dirty. And I think like nowadays there's so many different organizations on campuses. And if there isn't, like it's becoming increasingly easier to kind of go out and start your own. And like I mean we've seen that with Atlan right over the last few years. So I think for me it's more so like getting involved outside of just the classroom. Like I think the classroom's important, but I don't think it should be like the end all be all, right? Like for students, that may be watching that are part of the U, and like they always like sell iCore as like, hey, this is where you can find out like where you want to go. But to me, I think it's a lot easier to find out what avenues you want to go down when you're actually like doing hands-on stuff in each of them and kind of testing the waters for each. So that's kind of what I would say is just trying to be more hands-on and be more involved outside of just like the classroom setting.
Yeah, definitely. Just one thing that I'd add is just to like constantly be seeking new opportunities. And even if you're within an opportunity that you're super passionate about, there's always more people that you can connect with, not necessarily for anything, but just kind of expand your network. JJ kind of mentioned this, but really kind of like knowing a job or understanding what you're supposed to do or the fundamentals of it before you really reach out and start doing that is super important. And I think the best way you can do that is kind of go within different opportunities or maybe starting at a lower level at a certain location and then maybe moving your way up to somewhere that you want to be. Because I think experience is honestly going to be the thing that brings you to the place that you want to be the most. And it's not just going to kind of fall into your lap. So definitely take those chances and seek out those opportunities. Even if it's not the one that you specifically want, it'll give you the experience that will hopefully help you get there.
Also, it's an awesome piece of advice. Like, I can reiterate all of that. Like, I mean, school is a place where you learn. It's not like you learn, most of your learning doesn't take place in the classroom. It takes place in stuff you do outside and how you apply it. So yeah, I think for me, when I think I was also working part of some startups too during the school year as well. I learned more about like marketing than did in a lot of my courses that I actually teach marketing, and it just kind of gives the hands-on experience. So like, no longer is a framework. It's like, how do you action on this? What happens if someone says no, and bounce back from there. But yeah, the last thing I do want to cover up is a question in the chat from Ryan saying, it's like, what do you hope the main thing Atlan Ventures is known for 5 years from now, once next generation analysts come in? So I'll take that. And if anyone from Atlan anyone else wants to chime in for that too, please go ahead. And then I think we can wrap it up from here. I know we're running a little over time. So let me just let's answer this and we can probably finish up. So the question is, what do you hope the main thing Atlan Ventures is known for 5 years from now, once the next generation of analysts come in? And for me, or for most of half the fun too, like what we look for or what we want is, of course, to have the Atlan vision live on. I know Ryan was part of one of the earlier classes back with Lucas and Matt. And one thing we really like love from all of our like earlier, say, classes is that they gave us a lot of insight in how to do some diligence. They set the frameworks right, and we're just helping build upon that. So what we anticipate, let's say, like 5 years from now, is we want Atlan to be both a big part of entrepreneurship at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, but also be kind of like the basis model for other VC funds we've noticed growing out across the country. And no longer just being like, oh, we're just like the Midwest VC fund. Like we are helping startups up in other ecosystems, bring that Minnesota nice to a lot of other places that could use it, and really set in our stone, saying our unique value proposition. Anyone else wants to add anything about that? I know Saucy, as you were probably in classes then too. Anything you want to say, or you've seen for the last few years when you've seen Atlan grow?
Yeah, I mean, I think like it's been like I guess similar to like a startup experience, right? Like you start off with like the foundation and kind of figure your way out from there. Like so when I joined in my first semester of sophomore year, it was like a lot smaller group. We were like our fund was 150K, one LP, so like way different setup, right? And so I think that was like very much so like a learning period for everyone in the fund in terms of figuring out, processes, trying to like chip away at and put together like what our investment thesis kind of is. And like I mean even to this day I'm sure that's something that we continually kind of like try and narrow down and think through. So I think a lot of it is just like an iterative learning process. So I think 5 years from now or a few years from now it's just going to be a lot more of being able to take a lot of those learnings and then actually apply it. So it's a much better run organization, like smarter organization. I don't know. That's kind of what I see for Atlan down the road, because I mean that's what I've seen so far already, at least within the last like 3-4 years.
Kylie, JJ, do you want to add on to that? And let's give Anish to a point as well.
Yeah, sure. I think that kind of just to reiterate a little bit of what you've both said, just I think the biggest thing is just that I want more students to be able to kind of get involved and know that there are opportunities even at a young age. And I think that mental, like the idea of kind of like kids getting involved with things, or college students where it's like, oh, they're too young, like just the interns, shouldn't give them too much responsibility. I want Atland Ventures and even other student funds to kind of shift that mindset, where there are people who are willing to kind of take those chances and really go after that learning experience that maybe some other people aren't. So just kind of opening up just that idea in general.
And then Anish, do you want to say anything too, for being a Portco as well? Where do you want to see the vision as well? Because you are part of the journey with us too.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of my favorite things about Atland Ventures, and hopefully what continues happening, is like you guys are like really early supporters of Gen Z and student run companies. And I think that's not necessarily what all student run VCs should be about, but that should be a huge part of it, is like supporting your peers, helping them kind of go from 0 to like 0.1 as they kind of get on their journey of being an entrepreneur. So really like that about the fund. And the other thing too is like the level of diligence that you guys bring to the table as well. Like I've been continuously impressed both with how you handled like the investment process, but also how you continue, making sure that you're providing value to, at least from my experience, to your Portcos. You guys have been incredibly valuable for us. So I think that those two things will not only help you guys get more awesome companies, but also like really build a really awesome brand when it comes to student run VCs.